Hey, welcome back, Better Call Saul friends. Today we're going to go through 11 things that we learned in the 11th episode of the 6th season of Better Call Saul, titled Breaking Bad. If you have not seen that episode, please get out of here. I do not want to spoil it for you. Also, this is not going to be a traditional recap because you just saw the episode. So we're going to analyze and review 11 things that I think are really important for us to keep in mind for these next 2 episodes that we have of the rest of the series. So let's jump into it. The first thing that we learn is that the November 12th phone call, the much anticipated phone call, is between Gene and Francesca. Gene wants to catch up on everything that's been going on in Albuquerque, and so Francesca gives him the lowdown. She talks about how all of Saul's offshore bank accounts, they're gone. The bank accounts with Francesca's name on them, they're gone. The side businesses, including the laser tag and the nail salon, those are gone. And she says to him the only money that he has left is what is with him, which is a considerable amount of money, but it really hurts him to see that he's lost everything else remaining in Albuquerque. We also find out that Skylar White got a deal with the federal prosecutors. Huell is free from sitting in that DEA hotel room, and he is now in Louisiana. Daniel from season 1, I'll put a picture of him up right now. He is Danny, as Saul's referenced before, and he runs the laser tags. Tom Schnoz, the writer of this episode and many other great episodes, wished that they could have fleshed this character out more, but they simply did not have the time. So that was really cool to see that Daniel from season 1 is Danny, who runs the laser tags. The next thing that we learned in this conversation is that Bill Oakley's gay. Okay, just kidding. He switched teams. He is now a defense attorney. And he learned a thing or two from Saul about marketing as we see his name and face on a billboard. And he's also got a website up. If you go, I'll put it up on the screen right now, but he's got a nice website. Actually, it's not that nice, but he has a website up. The next thing that we learn is that the feds are still looking for Jesse and Saul since Walt is dead. That has not put the heat off. That's only amped the heat up in this situation. And then the last thing that we learn, or the last thing I'm going to point out in this video, is that Kim is still alive. She called Francesca after everything happened and it got in the news, and she asked about Francesca and she asked about Jimmy. Now, that leads us to our second thing that we learned, which is Gene attempts to contact and to call Kim. Now, after debating whether to do it or not, Gene tries to call Kim. We aren't sure exactly what happens, but it goes south, and he is really pissed off. So some questions I have here for all of us is this the first time that he's tried to call her? Because he knew the number to call, so maybe he's tried that before, or maybe Francesca gave him the number off screen and we didn't see it. And what happened when he was on the call that really upset him and triggered him? Did someone say that she did not want to speak to him? Or does she answer? If she does answer, what did she say that made him so upset? I personally think that he did speak to her and she said something that he really did not want to hear, but I think it's a safe assumption to say that we will be hearing more about this phone call and Kim in the next 2 episodes. The third thing that we learned, this is a quick one, is that Jeff, the cab driver, is not going to be Gene's foil. He is going to go along with whatever Gene tells him to do. This was a big relief for me because I was not looking forward to seeing Jeff being the one who brought down Gene. So glad we got that out in the clear. The fourth thing that we learned is that Viktor is back with the help of Jeff and his friend Buddy. So after the phone call with Kim, Gene has to go back to his old ways. He has to medicate in the only way that he knows how, by jumping into a con. He returns to his Viktor character where he liquors up people at the bar, makes himself look like a sucker. Then Jeff, the cab driver, drives them home, gives them tampered water, puts tape on their front door so that Buddy, the last man in on the con, can get in there with his very well-behaved dog. He will enter their place and get all of their info, including their driver's license, credit cards, bank accounts, investment accounts, and then he sells all of that information for a lot of money, which they of course split. And that's the con that they came up with, and they use it with a lot of success. And again, just got to reiterate, this is what Gene had to do after he had that bad phone conversation with Kim. So that this is his coping mechanism to be able to do these cons. So that's the fourth thing that we learned. The fifth The fifth thing that we learn is that we get to revisit Walt and Jesse kidnapping Saul. Now, this scene picks up right where it left off in Breaking Bad, when they enter the RV and start driving home. The main thing that we learned here in this scene is that Saul is really, really impressed with them. He's been hearing about the blue stuff out on the street, and as he inspects the lab, he says to them, "So you're not just doing distribution, you're the whole package." Saul's admiration for them will come up later on in this episode. And we can't forget that Jesse asks a question about Lalo. He says, "Hey, who's that Lalo guy that you were so scared of? I've never heard of him on the street." And Saul simply says, "He's nobody," changes the conversation, and off they go in the RV. The sixth thing that we learn is that the people that Gene wants to con, I think it really describes himself. So Gene says to Jeff and his and Buddy that the people that they're going after are single, they have no family, they have no attachments, and they have lots of money. My question to you, does that sound familiar? Because it sure sounds like he's describing himself. Now, will that come into play at all in the next 2 episodes? I'm really not sure, but I think it is something worth considering. The seventh thing that we learn is that Mike wants Saul to ignore Walt. Now, in our second flashback to the Breaking Bad timeline, Mike says that Walt is a complete amateur, but Saul sees someone who's 170 pounds of clay ready to be molded. He has a great feeling about this guy. He has top-of-the-line product, and with the right management, he's going to be great. Mike, long story short, says, let him go. Ignore him. Now, we knew this from much of Breaking Bad, especially as Gus was quite reluctant to work with Walt and Jesse at first. So this wasn't a complete surprise. However, it did confirm to us that Saul had an instrumental role in the chain of events that occur in Breaking Bad. And of course, we know that the entire Better Call Saul series has been one long chain of events that turned Jimmy McGill into Saul Goodman. So in a way, everything that happened in Better Call Saul leads to everything that's going to happen in Breaking Bad. I also want to point out that after this conversation with Mike, and I'll put a picture up of, Saul thinking about Walt, even though Mike's still talking to him, Gene could have stopped here. But he could not help himself. He could not resist. And so despite Mike saying, don't bother with this guy, Saul enters the school to go meet with Walter. And obviously we know what's going to happen in Breaking Bad. The eighth thing that we learn is that the episode Breaking Bad in Better Call Saul mirrors the scenes of Better Call Saul that we see in Breaking Bad. I hope that makes sense. So the scenes that we saw in Breaking Bad are the same scenes that we see in Better Call Saul, just from different perspectives. So we obviously saw Jesse and Walt kidnap Saul in Breaking Bad, and now we get to see what happens on the inside of the RV from Saul's perspective. In Breaking Bad, we see Saul enter Walt's chemistry room to Walt's big surprise, and Saul even says that his private investigator found him. We all assume that was Mike, but in Better Call Saul, as we saw last night, we see Saul walking up to the school after Mike had told him who he was, that he was an actual chemistry teacher and where he worked. We also see some mirroring in the situations that Saul and Gene go through. So Mike tells Saul to ignore Walt, but Saul does not take that advice and he starts working with Walt instead, leading to him eventually having to flee Albuquerque. In the Gene timeline, Buddy, Jeff's friend, tells Gene that he is not going to rob a guy with cancer. But Gene cannot help himself, and he ignores that advice, goes to the guy's house, and breaks into that house, and that's where the episode ends. So that's pretty interesting mirroring, and we will have to see if the consequences are going to be the same. Is it going to end the same way that Breaking Bad ended for Saul in the Gene timeline? Not sure, but we'll see. Pretty interesting, though. The ninth thing that we learn, and this isn't new, but Gene still cannot help himself. I just described how Saul could not help himself by working with Walt against Mike's advice, and how Gene can't help himself in stealing from the guy with cancer. You would think that Saul would have learned his lesson by now, but clearly he did not. It reminds us of one of many of Chuck's warnings that I'll play right now.
My brother is not a bad person. He has a good heart. It's just... He can't help himself. And everyone's left picking up the pieces.
And I should say, you could have picked any of the many clips that Chuck had warning people about Jimmy, but this one really felt like it was most appropriate in this circumstance. Gene, Saul, Jimmy, he just can't help himself. The 10th thing that we learn is that Marion has a computer and she is suspicious. She's been watching cat videos all day, God bless her, thanks to the gift from Jeff, her son. But towards the end of the episode, she sees the boys in the garage having some heated words, and she is quite curious. The writers are clearly giving us hints that Marion is going to have some kind of role in what's next to come from Gene, which leads us into our last point. And point number 11, I have a series of lingering questions that I would love to hear from you in the comment section below. But will we see Kim again? Physically, will we see her? I hope so. I think so. But that's still up in the air. Will Gene travel to Florida to go see her? Will Gene get arrested at the house of the guy with cancer? Or will he get away from that house, but he's going to have to go on the run because the guy with cancer spots him and they kind of figure out what's going on? Next questions. Will Marion discover who he is with her newfound YouTube skills? Will Marion subscribe to my channel and like this video just like I want all of you to do? And will Marion turn into a YouTube troll? And then my very last question, will Walt and Jesse show up again? And if so, how? I'd love to hear what you think. And again, if you like this video, please like, subscribe. Love talking to you all. Hope you're having a great day, and we will meet again soon. Bye.
So if you want to make more money and keep the money that you make, better call Saul.